Thank you, and I want to be real upfront about the fact that I am an activist about this stuff. I want to share with you today the passion of my professional work, which is about opening up museums, turning them into places that are not just places where people come to visit, but where you can actively participate, where you can connect with culture, and hopefully, through those experiences, connect more deeply with each other. Now, the problem is that for most people, museums are not seen as open spaces. Museums are seen as elite institutions. New York. They're seen as elite institutions that serve an increasingly small and limited subset of our population. So when most people go looking for a cultural experience, they don't go to a museum. You know, we live in an incredibly fertile, creative time. Look at what Luke's doing, and Allie, and all of the wonderful artists and cultural enthusiasts in our community. And you don't have to be a professional to be excited about culture today. You know, people are getting together in bars to knit. People are renting space and starting businesses so they can do science experiments together. The research on this is very clear. Throughout our country, people are more culturally engaged than ever, but they are choosing to have those experiences outside of traditional cultural institutions. That means you are way more likely today to pick up a paintbrush than you are to go to an art museum. Instead of going to a history museum, people are doing their own genealogical research. And as a museum director, I look at this and I say, we gotta get in on this game. These are people who care about culture. They're passionate about the things that we protect, and yet we're staying arm's length. What is that about? And when I talk with museum professionals about this, I hear some interest, but I also hear some real concern. This is a quote from a friend of mine who works for the Smithsonian, and she said, I know a lot of people who work in art museums who would recoil in horror at the idea of being inundated by Sunday painters. And I'm sorry, but if people who paint on Sundays are not the core audience for an art museum, I don't know who is. And so here in Santa Cruz, at our museum, the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History, we've decided we're going to open up to participatory culture. We're going to embrace it. And so yes, we invite people to paint with us on Sundays. We encourage them to share their own creative skills with each other, and you know what? Sometimes that involves tools that are a lot more extreme than paintbrushes. And so what I want to share with you today are just two of the ways that we are opening up our museum and how it's changing both our organization and hopefully our community. And so the first side of this is about active participation. We don't just invite you in to come visit. We expect every person who walks in our museum to contribute something to make our museum better. And that means from the instant you walk in the door, you will be asked to give us a suggestion for how we can improve the museum. We've invited visitors to write poems about objects in our history gallery. And now if you come in on the first floor, you can even bottle up a memory and put it on display for other visitors to see. Over the last year, thousands of visitors have contributed content to our museum, and it is beautiful, it's powerful, and it's meaningful to other people who walk in the door. But I think we all know that we've had experiences with participatory public comment that are not so meaningful. In museums, you can see comment books like this, full of repetitive, boring information. Sam was here, Jasmine was here, thank you very much. And I think we're all really familiar with this kind of experience online. You know, I don't think any of the people who made these YouTube comments are dumb people. What I see here is a lack of a designed opportunity to really invite them to give something meaningful to this situation. I believe that every one of us in this room has something really powerful and creative to add. I believe that every one of us has a story to share, that frankly, every one of you probably has something amazing to share from this stage today. But I also know that every one of us can be banal. We can all be idiots sometimes. And to me, as somebody who works on inviting participation, the difference is in how we design the invitation to participate. Good design can elevate us to share of our best selves in a way that lousy design cannot. Let me give you an example. This is from an exhibition I worked on in Seattle a few years ago. This exhibition was about advice, and these are just two ways in the exhibition that you could give and get advice. On the left, people could put up a question with a Post-it, and then you could give suggestions. People were very well-meaning and trying to help each other out here. On the right, they had constructed a fake bathroom door, and you can see that mostly what people did was scribble nonsense or write for a good time, call Johnny. Now, it's not like when you came in the door to this exhibit, we sent the well-meaning people to the Post-its and the fools to the door. The same people did both of these activities. And the reason they interacted differently was because of the design and the tools that were given to them. Here's an even geekier example. This is from the LA County Museum of Art. And they did this project a couple years ago where they asked people a question about art. And they gave some visitors white cards and golf pencils, and they gave some visitors these hexagonal blue cards and big pencils. And what they found was that people wrote better answers on the blue cards than they did on the white. Now, does this mean that blue is a magical color for participation? No. What it means is that if you give somebody a special tool, you make them feel valued, you show them that you actually care about what they're going to do, and it transforms what they do in return. And so at our museum, we think really hard about how to design those invitations to participate in ways that encourage people to feel valued and to feel like they better give something good back. So when we asked people for their stories of relationship breakups, we had them post them on this kind of wall. When we invited them to share their favorite memories of coffee, we gave them coffee beans to vote with so that they could smell and feel that experience of coffee. And again, when we wanted to ask people to share love letters, we gave them a typewriter to work with, an unfamiliar tool that caused them to slow down and to share something different. And right now, we're doing this memory jar installation where we're giving people mason jars and craft materials, and we're saying, think of a memory that's important to you. Use some craft materials to create a representation of it and bottle it up for somebody else to see. We've had over 300 people contribute jars in the last month. And here's just one I took a picture of last week. It says, I remember when you were alive, before Iraq and open pit burns which gave you cancer. I remember when we learned that you died in Iraq in our arms at home. I miss you, I miss you. I don't think this visitor, Mark, walked into the museum expecting that he was going to share this story. But this activity and the designed experience brought it out of him and made him able to contribute something really powerful to our museum and to the other visitors who walk in the door. And you know, this kind of participation isn't just changing the content of the museum, it's changing the way that visitors see themselves as creative agents. We've had a lot of positive response to what we've been doing over the last year, but one of my favorite quotes came from a teenager who said, you know what, we have been to famous art museums all over Europe, but this is the first exhibit that makes me want to do art. And I look at that and I am thrilled, not just because we've turned somebody onto culture in a different way, but because this is somebody for whom the museum has become relevant. This is somebody who's going to get more involved. And over the last year, we've seen this happen again and again. Just with 1 year of participation, we've totally changed what's happening in our museum. So from last year to this year, our attendance has more than doubled. Our busiest day has more than tripled. And we went from a tenuous financial position, one so bad you can't even see how much cash we had at the bottom of that chart. To a stable place that we can grow on. By doing this kind of participatory stuff, we're not just making the museum exciting, we're making it sustainable for the future. Now, you might look at all this and you might wonder, well, what about the objects? Aren't museums fundamentally about artifacts? And yes, we still have stuff at our museum. And so the next side of this that I want to talk about is how we're transforming our artifacts, starting to look at them as opportunities to mediate conversations between strangers. And to give you an example, let's go outside the museum. How many people here own a dog? Okay, great. So you've all had this experience. You're out walking your dog in public, and a stranger comes up and talks to you. And they're not really talking directly to you. They're sort of talking through the dog to you. You know, the dog has become this kind of safe social object that mediates an encounter that otherwise wouldn't happen. So as a museum designer, I get really curious about this. Okay, how could we make museum artifacts more like dogs? I'm serious. How could we make them opportunities for conversations that otherwise wouldn't happen? Because you know what? The kinds of social experiences that people can have around museum objects are bigger than the ones we have around our dogs. When you're walking down the street, you don't just start having a conversation with a stranger about what it's like to be in the military, like these people are as they're looking at artwork. When you're in the mall, you don't have a conversation about racial inequity, as these teenagers are as they look at stacks of money representing income disparity between whites and blacks in the US. Museum artifacts have the power to expose the big conversations we have to be having about where we've been, where we're now, and where we're going to go. And so again, at our museum, we think really carefully about how to bring to life the conversations that can happen around these objects, whether that's through a craft activity that gets people deeply involved with the work, or an activity that invites them to select which objects belong in the museum and which ones aren't relevant to our community. You know, some museums don't even give you a comfortable opportunity to sit down and talk about the objects on display. And we're really serious about this, so we even do things like design games that invite people to engage more with the work. And yes, all of these activities help people connect with the artifacts and learn more about them. But more importantly to me, they help them connect with people who are not like them and learn more about each other. Because we all know how a powerful social object can bridge a gap that otherwise we won't cross. And that leads me to my last point, which is that when we do this work, when we invite people to participate, when we see objects as locuses of conversation, we can transform museums from things that are nice to have to things that are really necessary to move our communities forward. You know, this isn't just happening here in Santa Cruz, it's happening all over the world. In Toronto, at the Ontario Science Centre, where they're inviting visitors to invent solutions to global problems. It's happening in Minneapolis at the Institute of Art, where every 10 years they have an exhibit where they say anybody and everybody in the community can bring in a small artwork and we will hang it on the wall of a world-class museum. It's happening at the Brooklyn Museum of Art, where they're using technology to experiment with new ways for people to engage with artifacts and with each other. And again, when I look at any of these examples, what I'm looking at are the people. So when people at my museum are doing a craft activity together, I don't just see people who are cutting up magazines. I see people who come from different walks of life who have been brought together through a cultural experience. And in Santa Cruz, perhaps one of the most powerful experiences we're having with that is happening outside the museum at a historic site called Evergreen Cemetery. About a year ago, the museum teamed up with the Homeless Service Center, and every Monday, museum volunteers and homeless volunteers come together to restore this important historic site for Santa Cruz. And yes, it is incredible that they are beautifying it, they're making it safe, they are literally uncovering history as they reveal gravestones of Santa Cruz's founders. Everybody who comes out and works at Evergreen has a powerful experience with history. But more importantly, everybody who comes out to Evergreen has a powerful experience with somebody who is not like them, somebody who they might be fearful of in another situation. And it's this kind of social bridging that culture can do, and can do so powerfully and so importantly for us today. And I want to leave you with just one last story of that kind, a really special thing for me that happened at the museum. A couple of months ago, we had this space set up where people could make collages in the museum. And I walked through and I saw this pretty typical museum scene. In the background, you have 4 young adults, Chicanos, who are making collages. And in the foreground, you have a separate group, one of our staff members, Stacy, who's meeting with an artist named Kyle. And, you know, there's his baby just looking cute. So 2 separate groups doing their thing in the museum. But the next time I walked through, I realized that, oh my gosh, these girls have gotten up, and the baby and the collages, 2 great social objects, have mediated a conversation between complete strangers about making art, about being a parent, about making a child. And then, the thing that happened next, and I wish I had a picture of this, the next time I walk through, Kyle has handed his baby to these girls, and they are sitting and making collages, and he is continuing his conversation with Stacy. I know. And I thought to myself, my God, if our museum can be the kind of place where somebody will willingly give their baby to a stranger, then we are doing a lot to overcome fear and divisiveness in our community. You know, we live in a really divided world, politically, economically, culturally, and I feel that we desperately need places that allow us to have positive interactions with people who are not like us. The ultimate measure of what we're doing right now at the Museum of Art and History is not about the experiences that happen inside the museum. It's about how those experiences transform the ones that people have when they go outside. I dream of a time when all of you can come participate at our museum, can connect with culture, and can walk out and have a better connection with somebody else on the street. I dream of a time when you will walk down the street And you will look around and you'll say, gosh, this is our community. You'll look at a stranger who's walking towards you and you won't think, oh, I'm going to ignore that person, or, well, I should turn away and go the other way. Instead, you'll get excited because you'll say, wow, I'm going to collaborate with this person. I want to get to know that person. You may not hand them your baby there on the street, but don't worry. You can come to our museum and do that. Thank you.